Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I'm Sonnet, the owner and creator behind Sonnet's Garden Blooms, and in today's video we are going to dive into some of the new IOD products. I was so excited about the new spring release and I could not wait to get started playing around with it. So in today's video, we're going to be playing around with the new molds and a few of the stamps, the paint inlay. So stick around and I cannot wait to show you the new products. For project one, I actually thrifted these little terracotta pots. I ended up getting them for free. I ended up with 6 of them. So for one project, we are going to take 3 of them. And first of all, I am going to use White Swan by DIY, which is a clay-based paint, and I am going to apply 2 even coats of White Swan to these containers. I'm going to paint the top, or all the sides, around the whole outside, I should say, the rim on the inside, and the bottom. Next, I'm breaking out the new mold called Dewdrop Pond from IOD. Look at all those cute little creatures on this mold. I'm taking cornstarch. That is something I always put in my molds before I use the air dry clay. It just really helps the clay release that much easier. I am also using air dry clay from IOD. A key tip here is after you open it, I do recommend putting it in like a Ziploc bag. Also taking a piece of paper towel, folding it, and just dampening it. Putting that in there, it will help keep your clay moist in between uses so it won't dry out. So I just take the clay out, I roll it, and then I put it into each of the molds. It really is as simple as that. The molds do have this micro rim edge, which really helps get a really nice flat back, so you get really just a crisp, clean image. From there, what I do once I have it in there perfect, I'm using gravity to help with releasing that mold. So I just tip it over and I am going to just let it fall out. From there, I'm using Titebond, and this is the Perfect Glue Titebond Quick and Thick, and I just put a little bit on the back, smooth it out with my finger, and then place it onto whatever surface that I want it to adhere to. The key here is just to make sure you get good adhesion, so without putting too much pressure on the actual mold itself, I just tap around the edges in the center and just make sure that it is completely adhered. Now I do that with all 3 molds that I'm going to be doing. Now this one is the little hummingbird. The first go around I did struggle a bit and I ended up wrecking his nose, put him right back in and redid him. So if something were to happen when you're taking it out, just put it right back in and out he'll come out perfect the next time. The next one will be the dragonfly, and sometimes when there's a lot of little parts, these can be a little bit more difficult to come out, but he popped right out with that cornstarch being in there, and look at all that detail. He is just absolutely beautiful, and again, I'm just using Titebond from called Quick and Thick, and we're just going to place him right on here. Let these dry overnight, and then we're going to come back and we are going to seal them. So anytime you're using DIY paint, you do want to seal that after you apply it. DIY paint can be reactivated, but the reason I want to seal everything is because I want to use a dark wax from DIY, and you can either use clear wax prior to using a colored wax, or you can seal it with Big Top like I'm doing. So I'm going to seal it with Big Top, and then I'm going to go in with the dark wax, and we're going to bring out all the details. So here it is completely dry. I am going in with DIY's dark wax. There is a dark wax and a black wax. I'm using the dark wax today. I also am using my waxing brush that I use just for the darker waxes. And I am going to load up my brush a little bit and dab off a little bit of the excess on the container top, and then go in all around the detail of each of the molds, and then just brush any excess around the rest of the container. After I apply all the wax, then I'm going to take a piece of paper towel and wipe off the excess. I'm going to do that with all 3 containers, and these are turning out so cool. I did like the crisp, clean white of the container, but again, I wanted to bring out some of that detail, so that's why I went with the dark wax, just to really bring out all that amazing detail from those molds. For project 2, I thrifted these recently, and I love the look of galvanized containers, especially for summer. So I decided to use Apothecary, and I'm just going to paint the center of each of the ones on the right Apothecary, and then also the hanger for the wall. I'm going to paint just a little chunk of that, the Apothecary, just to give it a little bit of color. I do apply 2 coats of Apothecary to all the items. I'm going to let those dry very well, and then we're going to come back and add a little bit of detail. So I have those 2 containers done. Now I'm going to just paint the center of this one, and then, like I said, we're going to let these dry, but I just, like I said, wanted a pop of color. The next step, I wanted to use the new set of stamps called Birds and Bees by IOD. If you have not used a set of stamps from IOD before, you just pull off that backing, take a little sanding block or a piece of sandpaper, just light grit, rub it all over the stamps, and that really preps them for ink. From there, here's the product ready to get stamped. I am going to just take a piece of the backing. I'm using this B. It's a really nice size. I'm just going to put it on a chunk of that backing. You can buy these in larger pieces. I always keep a really big one. I cut another one in half and keep a long length of one, and then just little chunks like this so that I can use smaller stamps. I'm going to ink it up with IOD's permanent ink. I'm going to make sure that I have it centerized, and then I start by holding it in the center, and then I work my way around each side. So I hold it to make sure it does not move, and then I, on the right side, just very lightly rub all over, then go to the left, do the exact same thing. The one thing that I did notice is when I pulled it back, there was one little spot in the center that I did not rub. So I went back in, I lined everything back up, and then I just touched, and it was a perfect image. For the next 2 little containers, I decided to break out the paint inlay called Melange. I loved these little scissors, and because there are 2 different ones within the paint inlay, I decided that would be perfect for each of these containers. And so I first start off by cutting out what image I do want. So I cut out both the scissors. This one has some writing underneath the scissors. Initially, I thought that would look kind of fun, but it was too big for the container. I didn't like how it fit on there. So the nice thing about transfers, paint inlays, you can pick and choose what you want on your project. So I cut that off, put it right back with the rest of the paint inlays to use it on a different project. And now we're going to do the next step. So if you have not used a paint inlay or it's been a bit scary for you, you apply one coat of paint. Then when you go to apply the second coat of paint, when it is wet, you then apply your paint inlay. So the key here is you want as little wrinkles as possible. So I start in the center and then I work my way to each side with my finger, smoothing out any of the wrinkles and really embedding that paint inlay in that wet paint. From there, then I take my mister and I just mist it, and again, I rub it really well and then wipe off any of that excess water that may have dripped around. I do that for both of the containers, and then next you let these dry. You want that whole piece of paper to completely dry, and then we're going to come back and do the final step. While those are drying, the last thing that I want to do for this container is seal it. Now the IOD black ink is permanent, but you do need to seal the DIY paint. So what I do is I go in with Big Top and I apply one even coat to the entire piece, and then I let it dry and it's totally finished. Now, the next step with the paint inlays is after it's dry, go back in with your misting bottle. Again, just make sure that entire paper piece is saturated or wet, and then pick a corner and then start slowly peeling it back. And here you can see you are getting a perfect image in your container. I love the paint inlays, and I know that they can be a bit scary at first, but once you guys start playing around with melange, you are going to absolutely fall in love with these. Now, if you noticed, I did set that paint inlay aside. Each paint inlay can be used up to 3 times. There is still paint on that inlay. Each image is going to be a little bit less and less. It's going to look a little distressed, but you can definitely get multiple uses out of your paint inlay. And once these are completely dry, then we're going to go back and seal them to seal in the paint inlay and the DIY paint. Here are the 2 paint inlays, and you can see that there are still paint on the actual inlay. So I'm going to completely let these dry, and then they are set to reuse. Now for my containers, I am going to seal them with DIY's Big Top. What I like to do is I like to load up my paintbrush and not put a lot of pressure over the actual paint inlay itself. I've heard that they can smear, so that's why I like to load up my brush and then gently rub over them. For our last project, I took the remaining 3 terracotta pots. I did the exact same thing. I painted them with white swan, and now we're going to do 2 different things. I am going to use a paint inlay on one of them, and then we are going to take the stamp set called Antiquities, and we are going to create our very own decoupage paper. So for starters, I decided we are going to cut out one of these cute little bees and we are going to put that on the center container. And just like I had shown you with the last paint inlays in the previous project, we are going to do the exact same thing. We are going to apply a second coat of paint and then just make sure that we have that paint inlay embedded very smoothly in the actual paint. And by doing just as I'm doing here, taking my finger, rubbing it over the paint inlay to really smooth out any of those wrinkles, that will definitely help. Once I get it all smoothed out, then I'm going to take that misting bottle again, spray a little bit on there, and again just rub a little bit more to really embed that paint inlay into your paint. Next, let's go ahead and make our own decoupage paper. So I love using stamps on rounded surfaces, but sometimes it can be a little difficult. So the easiest way to do that is to just take a piece of tissue paper and make your own decoupage paper. For starters, I am prepping my new set of stamps called Antiquities, and I'm just taking a very lightweight sanding block and just rubbing it all over the stamps, and that's really going to prep them for your ink. So I have a little backer and I am going to peel off the stamp that I decided I wanted to go with. I was kind of torn. I finally decided to go with the one that had the little beehive on it. I thought it would be very appropriate because I had a bee on the other one. So I pull it off and I'm going to put it on that backer. I'm going to ink it up with IOD's permanent ink, and then I'm just going to stamp it on an actual just piece of white tissue paper. From there, I'm going to just cut that out, and then I'm going to pick another stamp and do the exact same thing. I want to let these dry very thoroughly, and then we're going to take liquid patina from DIY, and we are going to decoupage them on these containers. For starters, I just want to cut away any excess tissue paper around the image. I just want as minimal when I say decoupage paper, tissue paper around the edges. And you can do this with any stamps. You can do it with any of the permanent inks. So you could do it with colored ink. You don't just have to do it with the black. Once I get that cut out, I'm going to do the exact same thing for the next one. And then let's go ahead and decoupage them on our containers. To do this, I'm using liquid patina from DIY, and this has been a great medium that I use with the recycled papers, and I loved using it with the tissue paper as well. So I am going to first off just hold my pot in one spot, and the key to decoupage without a lot of wrinkles is to start on either one side, whether it be the top or the bottom, or either the right side or the left side. So I line everything up. I then lay down on the one side, and then I just take my paintbrush and I smooth it all out, and then do the exact same thing on the other side. So now on to the next container, and again, this is a little bit bigger of an image, so I flip it down and I start on the top and then I work my way down. Just like I do with the recycled paper, I do a starter strip of the liquid patina. I then lay down my paper and I just work in sections all the way down, and it really prevents all your wrinkles. So often I hear people say, I laid down my decoupage medium and I just laid down the paper and there was a ton of wrinkles. I then tried to pull it up and it tore. So yes, if you work in sections and work your way down, it really prevents that from happening. Now that my paint inlay is completely dry, I'm remisting it to get that little piece of paper wet. And then I'm going to start on a corner and just start peeling the paper back. And then you can see how satisfying this is by pulling this back and seeing that perfect image of the bee. Now hold on to this because you can reuse it. I'm going to use Big Top to seal all 3 containers and your project will be complete. How about those molds, you guys? Oh my gosh, the detail. That is one thing that I absolutely love about IOD is all the products have such amazing detail. I love that micro rim edge on the molds, the birds and bees stamp. Oh, it is all to die for. So I was so excited to play around with it. I also want to dive more into the paint inlay, show you how many projects you guys can get out of that amazing paint inlay. For those of you that haven't dabbled yet with paint inlays, this is the perfect one to try out because not only can you get multiple uses out of each paint inlay itself, but there's so many projects that you can complete with one paint inlay because of all the different items in it. So I can't wait to hear what you guys think of today's video. I will definitely be showing you a whole lot more. You guys have yourselves a great day and we'll see you soon. Bye.